In business today, three things to know. First, the global consequence if Iraq implodes, from oil to military to regional instability, how the markets and the economy will react. Then, clouds over construction. Some home building numbers are down, others up. It's a housing market that still is on shaky ground. And USA! A startling victory for the Americans, how a strong World Cup performance could help the business of soccer right here. Arisexchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. The murderous rampage of Islamic militants in Iraq reached new levels Tuesday as they close in on a city just 40 miles north of the capital. Fighting between ISIS and Iraqi government forces is said to be intense in the city of Baquba, with civilians fleeing. U.S. President Obama has sent troops to protect American and embassy personnel, and the U.S. Navy has been moving firepower into the Persian Gulf. Former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, Ryan Crocker, told CBS News that diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis are long overdue.
Secretary Kerry, in my view, should be on a plane right now for Baghdad. The focus has been on the conflict. That is indeed serious, but diplomacy is what is crucial right now. We need to work with the Iraqis at the highest level. That would be Secretary Kerry, backed by the President, so that they can demonstrate the national unity, Kurdish, Sunni, and Shia, that is going to be essential if there is going to be any hope of turning back the ISIS threat.
So far, oil exports are not being interrupted, but what is the impact if Iraq disintegrates into a civil war? Jamal Abdi, policy director with the National Iranian American Council, which advocates for closer ties between the United States and Iran, is in Washington, D.C. to tell us more. Jamal, welcome to Arisexchange. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Let me start by asking, your thoughts on the idea that the Iranians and the Americans may actually participate together in trying to hold back this threat.
Well, I think this is actually a development that is maybe a long time coming. The United States and Iran both have significant interests in keeping Iraq stable and not letting the type of scenario that we're seeing play out now really become even worse. So I think that it makes a lot of sense for the two to be talking, potentially dialoguing, potentially even coordinating at some point to resolve this. And it also comes at a time when Iran and the U.S. have opened up other channels to deal with the nuclear issue. So I think that we're seeing the momentum of that relationship actually start to take hold and present some opportunities when both sides really need it.
What are the opportunities here, though? I mean, how far can the United States government really go? We don't actually talk officially to the Iranians at all.
Well, like I said, these channels have opened up. There are now normalized sort of ways that the two sides can actually engage each other. And I think as far as the opportunities for this, Iran and the U.S. have really been on the same side of a lot of these issues since 2001 with Afghanistan and Iraq taking out two of Iran's biggest enemies. I think what they can do now is, you have to have a political solution to this standoff. The United States understands they can't just dump more money and troops into this. There has to be an actual political solution, and Iran would need to be a part of that. Other players in the region need to be a part of that as well. And I think just the fact that you have a little bit of a hook with Iran right now, where you are finally talking, it's time now for the U.S. to say, okay, let's take this to the next level, and Iran as well, and figure out, okay, how do we actually get a solution that incorporates all the players in the region to stabilize Iraq, and then potentially, we need to be looking at Syria as well. This is overdue there as well, and these are, of course, linked.
Oh, well, very much, because there's insurgents in Syria that has spilled over into Iraq. The issue of the economic stability here, because that is something that everyone has a vested interest in as well. Right now, we're not necessarily really feeling it. What could be the impact here if Iraq does disintegrate to the world and global economy?
Yeah, I think it would be pretty devastating to energy markets. I think right now there's not a lot of spare capacity in oil markets. You've got problems in Libya. You've got sanctions on Iran that have effectively, reduced Iran's exports to about 1 million barrels per day. And you have the Saudis really, especially as we go into the summer, with not a lot of spare capacity to make up for that. So I think that if you see this, the instability itself is already having an effect on oil prices. But if you really start to see this thing consume the entire country and start to get into the South, which is unlikely but is not off the table, I think that would really put energy markets in a tough bind. And it really it demonstrates how important it is to put something together now to try to stabilize
Well,
this.
oil is a very speculative market. So far, the Iraqi oil exports have not been all that negatively impacted. You mentioned Libya. A good percentage of Libya's oil is not being shipped as well. Are we overplaying the concern a little bit? Are you saying the capacity is really that tight? The Saudis can't step up? The South America can't step up more?
I think that it's obviously, this is the effect we've seen so far is based on, speculation of what comes next. But remember, just a week ago, not a lot of people were predicting that Mosul was going to topple. So I think that it is really, it's going to push things to the margins, and you're not going to be able to have any other crisis emerge without things really being in a crisis situation as far as what's available.
Is there a political solution here? Because ISIS doesn't want a political solution, does it? They want an Islamic State.
Yeah, that's the problem here. And I think that the political solution is not necessarily one in which ISIS is convinced to stand down, but to ensure that this doesn't become a full-blown sectarian war, and to be able to have Sunnis and Shia at the table and to have real alternatives to these extremist groups. I think that's where the political solution lies, and that's going to necessitate Iran, the Saudis, all of the players to be able to sit down with one another and say, okay, this is a problem. We need to put an end to this because this is spiraling out of control.
Okay, Jamal Abdi, Policy Director of the National Iranian American Council from Washington, D.C. Thank you. Turning now to some economic news here in the United States. New data out today shows that the nation continues to make some steps towards the right direction, but more work to be done. Home builders broke ground on fewer new homes last month, but the rate of new construction is still the strongest that it has been in the past few years. The Census Bureau says housing starts fell 6.5% in May from April, while holding just above a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1 million. And the Labor Department says consumer prices jumped by 0.4% in May, the largest increase in over a year as the price of goods and services continued to soar. Let's take a look at the markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 27.48 to 16,808. The S&P 500 up 4 and change, and the Nasdaq up 16.13 to 43.37. Some of the top stocks we're watching today. Bank of America fined $32 million by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, known as FINRA, for allegedly skimming money from retirees' accounts. Bank of America closing up 31 cents. AT&T will be the exclusive carrier for Amazon's new smartphone, expected to be unveiled on Wednesday. AT&T also provides wireless services to Kindle tablets made by Amazon and e-readers. AT&T closing up 4 cents. And UPS is joining its competition, FedEx, by unveiling its new pricing plan for shipping. The company says dimensional weight will be utilized to calculate the billable weight of a shipment on all UPS ground services and UPS standard to Canada packages starting December. UPS closing at $101.61. And commodities, gold closing down $4.90 and oil pulling back 71 cents. The Federal Reserve is beginning its monthly two-day meeting. Do we expect any policy changes? Peter Cardillo is chief market economist with Rockwell Global Capital. Do they only work 2 days a week or 2 days a month?
No, not really. But anyway, it certainly looks that it.
It does look that way, right?
Yeah.
The two-day meeting. I don't know what the rest of the time. Okay, so what do you expect that comes out of this?
Nothing. I think, we're probably going to see a repeat of the statement that we got the last time around, and I kind of suspect that they might hint to perhaps maybe slower growth. The
IMF has lowered its expectations to about 2%. Does the Fed sort of follow?
I think there's a chance of that, even though I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the IMF call of 2% annualized growth. I think we're probably going to be closer to 2.5%. If you look at all the economic indicators so far, there have been a few that have been mixed. In fact, we saw that today. But if you look at some of the stronger ones, like the leading indicators, industrial production, and most of them have been coming out better than market expectations.
Consumer confidence, a leading indicator as well.
Consumers' confidence, absolutely, and there have been revisions. So I think, we're pulling out of this winter negative economic activity. And so I think that leaves room for the Fed, to stay the course, obviously.
So you expect tapering?
Oh, absolutely.
$10 billion.
No question about that.
And holding the line of interest rates near zero.
Absolutely, no question about that. There's a lot of talk about this dot.
I was going to ask you about this. What is their new dot performance indicator that they've come up with?
Yeah, basically, what happens here is the Fed members give their personal viewpoint of where interest rates are going to be or where they're headed. And so this new index, so-called indicator, seems to be pointing to perhaps a rate change sooner than later.
Is this sort of a collective consciousness of the Fed governors? Is that the premise of it?
Exactly. But also you have to realize now that this time around we have 3 new Fed members that are going to be chiming in.
Are some of them kind of egging that interest rates should start rising?
Well, look. If you've followed the many speeches that we have, week after week, they're basically divided. We have the hawks, we have the doves, and basically, it's never an even keel.
What do they do, though, when you have like a housing number that came out today on construction, yet you also have a CPI number showing inflation, and let's face it, inflation is worse than 2.1%, especially when you throw in things people buy, like meat and chicken and eggs.
Yeah. Look, exactly. If you look at the inflation rate that came out today, the core rate that came up higher than expected, most of that is transitory inflation, inflation that you have no control of. Agricultural products. Obviously, they are passed on to the consumer. Gasoline at the pump is passed on to the consumer. But other inflation, stationary inflation, there is no, up until now anyway, there is no pricing power. And so it can't be passed on to the consumer right now. The economy is not strong enough. And where does the real inflation kick in? It kicks in at the labor.
At the wage, and we see no pressure on wages.
There's no wage pressures there because we're still at high levels of unemployment.
Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist with Rockwell Global Capital. As always, thank you.
My pleasure.
Coming up, the rising fortunes of professional soccer in the U.S. You're watching Arisexchange.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, and not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
If I were to build my own news network, it would certainly have to reflect a diversity of culture, because that's the global situation, that's the global reality.
I would probably bring a lot of personal stories, really personal stories from the leaders of all countries.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arisexchange. Time now for our business ticker, stories making news around the world. It will be the world's largest ocean preserve ever created. President Obama announcing new efforts to protect areas of the Pacific from drilling, overfishing, and other environmental damage. Appearing in a video message at the State Department's Our Ocean Conference, the president had this to say about the initiative.
Today, I'm building on that progress by directing the federal government to create a national strategy to combat black market fishing that threatens our oceans, undermines our economy, and often supports dangerous criminals. And like Presidents Clinton and Bush before me, I'm going to use my authority as president to protect some of our most precious marine landscapes, just like we do for mountains and rivers and forests. These are just a few of the steps the United States is taking to keep our oceans strong and healthy.
Again, in an executive order, the proposal includes expanding the Pacific Remote Island Marine National Monument to nearly 782,000 square miles. It will go into effect later this year. The U.S. Congress has decided to save the world from Dr. Oz. It has dragged the TV doctor, Mehmet Oz, to testify in front of the Senate committee investigating weight loss scams. The hearing explored the problem of fraudulent businesses using Oz's language to sell fake diet products. Oz admitted that his cheerleading, quote unquote, for certain products has caused him some trouble. Here's what he had to say.
It's a problem that I have spent immeasurable time, energy, broadcast resources, and money trying to combat. I'm chagrined to say the problem has only increased exponentially. I am forced to defend my reputation every single day.
During the hearmakers, lawmakers repeatedly grilled Oz about his miracle claims for products such as green coffee. The Federal Trade Commission is currently suing a company that capitalized on the doctor's claims that green coffee bean extract is a new weight loss remedy. Well, nobody can say New Yorkers don't honor their bets. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio went on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night to sing I Love L.A., making good on a bet he had with Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti over who would win the Stanley Cup. Needless to say, as we know, the New York Rangers, who were up against the Los Angeles Kings, did not win. So here's the mayor.
I love L.A. We love it. I love L.A.
We've had a lot of singing politicians. Chris Christie doing the Father's Day dance. The mayor, accompanied by children from the 52nd Project in Manhattan, dove right into the song. Although soccer is the world's most popular game and 13 million Americans are said to play it, the game has historically struggled to succeed on the professional level here. But Major League Soccer has grown over the past 2 decades. It's been in business. There are now 19 teams, 16 in the U.S., 3 in Canada, with a new $90 million television contract. Also, here's an interesting fact. The U.S. brought more foreign fans to the World Cup in Brazil than any other country. And last night's win by Team USA has highlighted growing enthusiasm for the sport. To talk more about the future and the state of soccer in the United States is Dan Courtemanche. He is Executive Vice President of Major League Soccer. Welcome to the program, Dan.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You go through the bars here in New York, and they are packed, not just for the U.S. game, but for the other World Cup games. And it's not just sports bars. It's now, a friend of mine pointed out that every bar has become a World Cup soccer game. Soccer bar. This has got to be both an opportunity and a challenge for the league, though, because you want to convert those fans into MLS fans. How do you do that?
Well, look, every 4 years, the World Cup really raises the water level and the profile for soccer in this country. It's our job as Major League Soccer to capitalize on that. This year, we have 22 players who will be in Brazil on 7 different national teams. We've got 10 on the U.S. team. So when Clint Dempsey scores a goal 30 seconds into the game, he plays for the Seattle Sounders. That's going to raise the profile of MLS.
But do people know that? I mean, are you getting out that message?
I'm on today's show. That's part of it. So that's part of it. Part of our advertising campaign this year was club and country. You play for your club, you represent your country. So all these players down in Brazil will be waving the flag for their country, but also the flag for their MLS teams. As we come out of World Cup, our marketing campaign will be geared toward It's Right Here. You've seen these guys down in Brazil. Come back. Watch Clint Dempsey when the Seattle Sounders play the Portland Timbers in front of 67,000 people in July up in Seattle.
You know, it's finally gaining traction in television markets, isn't it? You signed a contract in November that was 3 times more than a previous contract at $90 million. It's still less than half of what the NHL has, a league that would be, you know, of the leagues, about third in line or so behind baseball and basketball and football. How have you been able to translate that into more television viewers? How have, that must be a sign that there's more people watching.
Yeah, for us, studies show, and this is ESPN's independent research, that among 18 to 34-year-olds, professional soccer is the second most popular sport as a consumption sport behind the National Football League. It's tied with the NBA. So among that young audience, the audience that advertisers covet, it is raising in popularity. This year, we're up about 100%. For games on NBC Sports Network. We're up on the Univision Network and also on ESPN. So we're making progress. Now, we're only 19 seasons old. The National Hockey League that you mentioned has been around a long, long time, as has the National Baseball, the Major League Baseball or the National Football League.
I read an interesting statistic that there are more people who are attending the games than NHL and basketball games, but not viewership still in television. It's still a sport that's not friendly from a TV perspective, for an American TV perspective, is it?
It all depends on how you look at it. Last night's game had 15 million viewers. Not too bad.
But it's the rooting for your country in the World Cup, clearly. How do you continue to draw those viewers in every day on a game that does not have natural commercial breaks, for example?
Yeah, it's consistent marketing and promotion and getting the highest quality players. Now, we're only 19 seasons old. Our goal is to be among the best leagues in the world by 2022.
Yeah,
so we have a few years, and we want to be one of those elite leagues, and we have to bring in players. We have to raise the profile of our clubs.
And you know what Europeans say, that the league is still sort of in the minor leagues, if you will, compared to world soccer. How do you do that without just throwing a ton of money at these players?
Ultimately, you got to develop players, just like they do in Europe, throughout Latin America. In 2007, we mandated to all of our clubs they had to have youth academies. This is the first World Cup team for the United States where one of our players out of the academies, DeAndre Yedlin from the Seattle Sounders, is actually on our World Cup team.
That is very big in Europe, isn't it? That the major league clubs have tremendous youth clubs, which is foreign here.
It's much more cost effective to develop the players in your youth academy than to go buy David Beckham or David Villa or Thierry Henry.
But it takes a long time. It can
take a long time.
Tell me a little bit about the new New York club that's starting up.
Well, it's a great ownership group with the owners of Manchester City in England and the New York Yankees. They're going to kick off next year. They have David Villa, who's the all-time leading goal scorer for Spain. They just announced his signing. They're going to play in Yankee Stadium, but ultimately they're going to play in their own stadium, just like 15 of our current clubs, where they've built or renovated stadiums specifically for Major League Soccer clubs. And it provides that intimate environment that really is appropriate for the fan.
Dan, we hope to have you back on when the season starts. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Coming up, what African country doesn't have giraffes? The embarrassing gaffe of an American airline. You're watching Arisexchange.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News. Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Time for Liquid Lunch, things that make us want to drink. Delta Airlines was so excited about the Team USA's 2-1 victory over Ghana at the World Cup that it sent out a tweet congratulating the team. Delta should probably stick to flying airplanes. Delta, which does fly to numerous African countries, including Ghana, apparently needs a little help in understanding which animals live where. Here is the tweet. USA with the score 2 next to the Statue of Liberty. That makes sense, right? And Ghana with the score 1 represented by a giraffe. The problem? There are no giraffes in Ghana. In fact, there are no giraffes anywhere near Ghana. Delta has since apologized. Next, you know, Luxembourg and the Cayman Islands are tax havens, but we'll introduce you to a state here that has become one as well. You're watching Arisexchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Song Hai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
South Dakota is the new home of the nation's wealthy elite who are setting up shop there to protect their trust funds. And get this, many never visiting the state. That's according to experts who say the uber rich are renting addresses to take advantage of South Dakota's tax-friendly trust laws. If not, it's cold weather. Analysts say in the past 4 years, South Dakota trust companies have administered more than $121 billion, almost all of it coming from out of state. For more on this, we turn to David Selig, a federal tax practitioner with his own firm. David, welcome back to Arisexchange. Well, when you think tax havens, I think Luxembourg and Monte Carlo and places that I actually would like to spend a lot of time at. Not that I don't want to spend time at South Dakota. I don't think of South Dakota. What has made it a tax haven?
Well, if you have an extra $5 million, South Dakota is the place to go. I'll tell you why. You can establish a trust, and that trust can, for all intents and purposes, continue for perpetuity. Whereas in New York, it would be for the life of the beneficiaries plus 25 years. So they've effectively found a way to avoid federal estate tax.
And you never have to pay federal estate tax if it's in a trust.
That's correct, but there's something that's an even bigger draw. It is a well-known little published fact about this. The so-called dynasty trust is as secret as a Swiss bank account used to be.
What is a dynasty trust?
Okay, that means essentially it goes from generation to generation. But this is what makes it so compelling to a lot of people. You can, in many cases, escape your creditors. In other words, let's say you're a little concerned, you have a judgment or something, or the judgment is pending, the money is in the trust. It's very unlikely your creditors are going to be able to get their hands on it.
Do they even know it exists?
Well, that's the secrecy.
Exactly.
That's the issue.
How does that work? And why can they pass laws that seem to circumvent federal law?
Well, there is one seminal case on this, and they prevailed. I imagine now that it's getting some publicity, with all the rhetoric about financial inequality and such, maybe it'll be revisited by the United States Tax Court.
Does South Dakota itself benefit from this in any way? If the money is parked there and nobody's paying any taxes, what's the state getting out of it?
That's a very good question.
You're not even going there to set up the account.
Well, the fact of the matter is you don't have to live in the state or visit the state to be the beneficiary of this trust.
So I don't have to put all the money in a suitcase and bring it there myself.
Right. I guess if you go out to the abstract, setting up these businesses there is good for the state, and I support it. And it's not illegal. Again, it's tax avoidance, not evasion.
That's correct, and we discussed that before. But they are taking advantage of key loopholes. And so who may come in to try to force them to close those loopholes?
Well, I would imagine the Internal Revenue Service may raise a couple of challenges.
They had to have known about this.
Okay, yeah, they do. And as a matter of fact, this administration has limited the amount that you can put into the trust at $5 million, which may sound like a lot of money, but to the super rich, it's probably insufficient. I'm sure they would want these trusts to be much better funded.
So when you compare this to the better known tax havens like Switzerland and the Cayman Islands and those type of places, are there more benefits, greater benefits to doing this in South Dakota?
Sure, particularly now with all the disclosure rules and the fact that many of these foreign countries are toppling like dominoes. They're giving the information over to the...
Well, isn't that ironic that the Department of Justice here in the United States and our State Department is leaning on Switzerland and Luxembourg and these other countries, and yet in its own backyard in the continental U.S., the state is getting away with it?
Well, they're really not getting away with anything wrong.
I understand.
A lot of the monies that were parked in these foreign accounts and such had never been taxed. Presumably, the money that's used to establish these trusts have already been taxed.
Is there anything beneficial to people don't have $5 million? If you have, a few $100,000 and you want to leave it to your kids, is it beneficial to go to South Dakota and do that?
You've got a lot of great trust and estate attorneys probably in your own state, New York, wherever you may be. Should really speak to them, and whatever you do, don't do it yourself, because it's a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
We have about 30 seconds or so. The Dakotas are really sort of in this battle competition. Is it you have North Dakota with all of the fracking money going on, and now you have South Dakota as a tax haven.
Sure.
It sets up good competition between the states, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and nothing wrong with a little healthy competition.
Okay. David Selig, thank you so much for trying to explain through what sounds like a complicated issue, but it's an interesting story about South Dakota.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Thursday on Arisexchange, the next threat to your privacy could be hovering over your head while you walk down the street. Hackers are developing a drone that can steal the contents of your smartphone and what you can do to protect yourself. We'll talk about it here on Arisexchange. Let's take a look at the market screen across the boards today. For the most part, the market's kind of brushing off the news about the housing and about the consumer price index, up 27 points for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 up 4 and change, the NASDAQ up 16.13. The Fed has begun its two-day meeting. Tomorrow, we will learn what the Fed has discussed. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arisexchange. We will see you back here on Wednesday. Have a good night.